Hello. In the next 15 minutes or so, we would like to introduce you to CA solution for infrastructure provisioning on the NetApp FlexPod architecture. My name is Didier de Kock. I'm a pre-sales consultant in CA's virtualization and automation CSU, and I've been working with our automation suite for about 5 years, and I'm really excited to see how I was able to help one of our mutual customers meet their business needs. So CA and NetApp have close ties, both from a business alliance perspective as well as from a product development perspective. We also have many mutual customers, and this particular customer is located in the Southeast and is a major player in the MSP space. After our sales teams got together to discuss the opportunity, we actually decided it would be best to run the POC from your CPOC in Raleigh. The customer had historically been focused on the large enterprises, but the business has now decided to expand to the SMB market. To that effect, they were adding a whole new set of software as a service offerings for small and medium businesses. Now, because they couldn't predict the future growth, they needed a solution that would scale with their needs at the lowest possible cost. And the technical team made it clear they want a solution that would allow them to provision the entire infrastructure with a single click. So the use cases given to us were meant to verify the solution's functionality. And for demonstration purposes, we actually decided to break out the use cases to allow us time to discuss each section. So the first use case was the provisioning of a new VMware ESXi 4.1 host on a Cisco blade. The second use case was to provision and attach a new NFS data store on this ESXi host. And the last use case was to provision the virtual distributed networking components on this ESXi host. So we will demonstrate you how we accomplish this in just a second, but first let's have a look at the POC components. So we actually use a small FlexPod, which was already loaded with an ESX server and a couple of management VMs. The CPOC itself already had Data Fabric Manager, UCS Manager, and vCenter loaded, and we installed the CA Server Automation components on 2 additional VMs. So using our OS installation module, we created a UCS boot image as well as an ESXi OS image. We also had to configure a user in the UCS Manager, which would allow us to perform certain UCS management functions. And we also pointed our software to the UCS Manager. Now, from a single UI, the user can actually provision a new physical machine, a virtual machine, or a public cloud machine, so all from one location. We also have a unique imaging feature that allows us to capture a live system and redeploy this to new infrastructure. So this would be a great way for customers to move legacy hardware to a FlexPod, or for customers who want to move VMs into and back from the cloud. Now, the user can also provision applications and patches to those machines. This provides him with a complete server lifecycle solution. So first of all, we need to pick our UCS options. And typically, customers will have more than one UCS manager, so it's important that they can centrally manage this. The service profile allows the user to define the characteristics and the interfaces of the new server. And talking about service profiles, we can also create a new service profile if we wanted, or synchronize service profiles between multiple UCS managers. So then we need to tell which chassis and blade to use, or we can actually make it automatically select the first available blade. And when we do that, it shows us the hardware information for that particular blade. Then we need to provide some basic information about the ESXi server, like host name, image selection, and so forth. Now, selecting the scalability server allows us to provision as close to the managed resource as possible, instead of pumping gigabytes over the WAN. And finally, we give it some additional options for ESXi, and actually we're good to go. So our blade gets the right service profile assigned and automatically gets powered on. Then our boot image is actually deployed to the blade, and note that this is actually a universal method which we also use when we provision Windows and Linux servers. After that, our ESXi image gets deployed, and as an end result, our ESXi host is provisioned. We have a fully functional VMware ESXi server ready to be consumed in vCenter, which is what we will do in a second. But before that, we actually want to add some storage to it. So how do we get there? Well, we simply have to set up a storage service using NetApp's provisioning manager. We also have to create a user on the Data Fabric Manager, which allowed us to perform certain management functions on the Data Fabric Manager. And then finally, we pointed our software to the DFM. So as you can see, our ESXi host only has a local disk. And from the same interface as before, we can now provision and attach the storage to our host. So we pick our provisioning method, which typically is going to be a storage service, but you can also do a storage policy. And then we give it some information about our host, the actual data store name, and which DFM we actually want to use. Now before we select our storage service, we can actually look at the details of that particular service and make sure it meets our needs. Finally, we tell which protocol to use. In this case, it's NFS, and we hit finish. So at this point, our storage is not only provisioned, but it is also attached to our ESXi host. So typically, these are two separate operations performed by two different groups, and normally they have to wait on each other. So we can complete this in a single operation, providing greater agility and lowering the operational costs. So as you can see, the end result is a new NFS data store attached to our ESXi host. So the advantage of the integration between NetApp and CA is that it provides both provisioning and attaching of a storage in a single step. And we can also rapidly provision storage as part of the virtual or physical server provisioning process within our solution. Now we provide multiple interfaces for different kinds of users. So you've seen the UI, but we also actually have a process automation connector, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, and also allow people to hook into our web services to build more complex scripts as you want. So last use case was the VMware Virtual Distributed Network. So we got the action in using a couple methods, and the reason we used a couple ways was to demonstrate our strong integration capabilities of our product. Now, just recently, CA launched a new product called CA Network Automation, which provides network provisioning and network compliance functions for a broad set of network devices, including the Nexus 1000V. Now, we didn't have that back then, otherwise we would have used it. So our vCenter already has a couple of data centers defined, but we're actually going to add a new data center, add our ESXi to that data center, and take it out of maintenance mode. So what you're looking at here is our process automation product, which allows to glue these different operations together. So this is what we would use for one-click infrastructure provisioning functionality. It basically hooks back into the functions you've seen in the previous slides. PAM has connectors for NetApp, Cisco UCS, VMware, and many other products. Okay, so now we have our new data center. Our ESXi host is attached to it and is put out of maintenance mode. So next, we actually want to add some networking components to that ESXi host. So in our use case, we actually want to set up a new VMware virtual distributed switch. We also actually create a use case where the end user could actually select the VMware VDS and pick how many port groups he wanted associated VLANs. So after our automated process flow, we now have a new VDS ready for consumption. So this brings us to the end of our session. We hope you learn a little bit more about how CA's automation suite for data centers can provide value to our mutual customers who are interested in standing up new FlexPods.